The following episode opens with police sirens and caution tape as we're given a brief, safe-for-work glimpse at Tuckson's body. In the background, there's a ringing noise that increases in pitch and intensity. In a flash, it becomes a buzzer for the sparring class, and we see that the vision of the crime scenes were actually a nightmare that Blake was having during class, with her jarring awake just like she did in the original volume after Pyrrha's fight in episode 5. Glinda gives her a rundown about the dance and about missions coming up, and things progress normally. We go through similar steps as they leave class, where Blake rejects Sun's invitation to the dance, and then we have the team confront her back at the door. It's quickly established that the murder happened about 2 weeks prior to this point, so a hefty amount of time has passed, enough so that Tuckson has already been buried, but his death has obviously left a significant strain on Blake. Weiss talks about how Blake's depression has begun damaging her lifestyle in the intervening times. Not eating, not sleeping, fluctuating grades, and so on. Blake shoves all that concern away, explaining that it wasn't just Tuckson, that everyone involved with Tuckson had been hit, and it has only heightened her fear of what the White Fang are capable of. People's lives are at stake. Her life is at stake. The other three try to assuage her with the information they dig up during the investigation, all of which points us somewhere in the southeast of Vale, serving as the White Fang staging area. From here, the scene doesn't modify too greatly from what it was, other than despicing a little extra gravitas from Blake grieving as she swears to hunt down the White Fang that killed Tuckson before they get a chance to hunt her down too. They try to get her to the dance, she runs off, cue John trying and failing miserably to woo Weiss. In all of this, we also establish that Yang and Weiss are helping to set up the dance, which is happening at a venue in downtown Vale near the CCT. The next scene with Pyrrha and Jean is completely unchanged, but there are some small mods to the Cinder, Mercury, and Emerald plotting scene. This is the first instance that we've seen the three in a vacuum, and Cinder's portrayal here is a little different. She's not as cool or calculated, she's relaxed, less commanding, and seems like actual friends with Mercury and Emerald, at least in a superficial sense of the phrase. The conversation is only really tweaked to match the shift in tone, which is still ominous, but that comes mostly from the subject matter and not necessarily because Cinder's trying to be Miss Tryhard Intimidation 24/7. There's also where we get some extra elaboration on how they figured out Pyrrha's semblance, with both Cinder and Mercury remarking that it seems to work on the principles of magnetism, but it also seems to affect non-magnetic metals as well, such as aluminum cans, and as we'll learn in Season 3, Mercury's legs. This is the first time we get to hear a semblance rebranded from polarity to ferrokinesis. They muse whether or not Pyrrha understands the full extent of her ability, but regardless, Cinder decides to adopt the Invincible Girl as a pawn in a later step of her plan. Episode 11 is really just a retrofit episode 6, with Weiss, Ruby, and Yang all preparing for the dance. This scene carries on unchanged, as do most of the scenes in this particular episode, so we'll only be hitting the bullet points for those. However, the scene where Blake and Yang talk is changed just a bit to recontextualize the background Yang describes for herself in RWBY. There's a little extra emphasis put on Yang asking the question of why Raven left, maybe via an added line that explains that her father refused to elaborate on any details, specifics, or motives. In that, we could also try to generate some feelings of malignance towards her father, and perhaps indicate that he himself is a key factor in her more rebellious moments because he refuses to give her the closure she so desperately craves. Additionally, maybe throwing an extra line in there about Yang's visioneering would help keep the focus of the story on track. Overall, I think the story does tie somewhat well into Blake's anxiety, especially now that we've buffed it by mirroring parental figures dying suddenly. But I think putting a touch more pressure on the fact that Yang got tunnel vision while seeking out her question would help better key the audience into the parallel she's trying to draw. Still, we convey the point that Yang was stupid and almost got herself and her sister killed while looking for her deadbeat mother. This also comes with a significant change to the dialogue after the story itself. Blake acknowledges what Yang is trying to say, but rebuffs it by saying the circumstances are different, that they're the only people who can stop the White Fang and Torchwick. Yang challenges that by asking what Blake plans to do. Storm out the door and walk to the kingdom's edge? She elaborates that Weiss crunched the numbers, and without more information, it'd take days, if not weeks, to scour the kingdom's outskirts for the White Fang, and in that time, they'd all be expelled completely out of hand. Osborn told RWBY he would handle it. The people that can do something have the information they need. Blake shoots back that she can't just sit there doing nothing while her life is at risk, and in response, Yang shouts that their lives are always at risk. They're becoming huntsmen, professional monster hunters. Their lives are always going to be in danger. Hell, Weiss, she points out, already has to live with the threat of assassination hanging over her head, and that doesn't stop her from participating in life. Blake is stunned silent, and Yang doesn't give her time to respond, simply reiterating the statements she's made throughout this whole conversation. She just wants Blake to slow down, catch her breath, and have faith the people in charge will take care of the problem. She leaves Blake to think, promising to save a dance for her. There's really nothing to change in John Wren's comedy routine when John asks Wren for dating advice, other than adding a tinge of frustration from Nora's tone as she chides Pyrrha for not following her own advice. This is to set up a plot point I'll get into later in Volume 3, but for now we can leave it as a moment of genuine concern from Nora. A quick cut and we have the scene with John approaching Weiss and failing because she's already asking Neptune. He leaves dejected and we cut to just outside the dance where Blake in full dance attire meets the moping Sun and they go to the dance together. Episode 12 is a dance proper, and for the most part, it starts out like it did before. Ruby complains about walking in heels, Blake and Yang dance before Blake dances with Sun, Osmond talks around Ruby about the crippling existential threat that surrounds their lives as huntsmen, and Ruby and John support the walls nearest the punch bowl. Ruby of course finally mentions Weiss came alone, John goes to confront Neptune about it, and is distracted when Pyrrha crosses his path. They talk, Pyrrha admits her pathos, and when she leaves we get our first real departure from the sequence. Instead of having Neptune kind of randomly wander out to get yelled at, we leave John on the balcony, lost in thought. We also have a small cutaway showing Pyrrha briefly and silently debating between returning to the party and heading to the bathroom, of which she chooses the latter. Now we cut back to inside the dance, where we get new scenes of Ruby, Blake, Sun, and Neptune running into Penny and CL, who are also in attendance. Penny is of course all dressed up, but CL is all business, acting as Penny's escort. CL objects to Penny interacting with Ruby, but her objections are drowned out when Yang strolls along and pulls Penny off towards the group. CL tries to separate the two immediately, but Yang just shrugs her off, and there's a brief confusion over who CL even is before proper introductions between CL, Penny, and the rest of the characters present are made. When CL explains that Penny isn't supposed to be interacting with any of Team RWBY, Ruby quickly turns to Yang and whispers, "Overprotective father," and Yang perks up. She grabs Penny's hand and leads her deeper into the party, away from the scrambling CL, while citing, "Yep, okay, now's the time for some teenage rebellion." From here, it's a sequence of cute little character interactions, veritable fluff to pad the episode, but also allowing our characters to come across as actual friends. We get a cameo from Yang's friends from Season 1 as they talk to Weiss and Yang, though they are less prominent now because Yang has successfully integrated with her new friends here at Beacon and has left her old ones sort of behind. There's a provocation between Nora and Penny that leads to an arm wrestling match between the two, one that catches everyone but Ruby off guard when Penny easily beats out Nora. There are even shenanigans with the punch bowl, with Blake in an uncharacteristic moment of clumsiness spilling the bowl on CL, forcing the girl to go off and get changed. There are maybe one or two more scenes like that before we get to the next linchpin. Penny teaching Ruby how to move in heels, albeit in a very crash course sense of teaching. All the same, when Penny is satisfied with Ruby's movements, she asks Neptune to dance with her to get a feel with it, choosing him randomly from the group. Both of them are uncomfortable with the prospect before Sun swoops in and offers to be Ruby's partner instead. Ruby is still of course awkward, but Sun waves away those nerves. He's just the cheery, kind of upbeat guy that can do that for his friends. This is where Pyrrha rejoins them, and when asked where she's been, she deflects the question. There's around the same time that Nora asks where John's been this whole time, and Pyrrha comments that she last saw him out on the balcony. Still feeling pressured to dance with someone, Neptune volunteers to go looking for him, and that's where we lead into the confrontation between him and John. That goes off relatively the same, maybe tweak a few words here or there, and the rest of the dance happens as normal. Ruby and Yang speak, Neptune goes to Weiss, John shows up in the dress, and everyone gets roped into a scarily synced dance sequence, which, I'll be honest, is goofy enough fun that I'm perfectly fine keeping it in. The last shot is of Emerald and Mercury, not on a balcony but next to a door, giving Cinder the green light for her part of the mission. Episode 13 begins with Cinder's approach towards the CCT, this time coming from the ground level and using the gnarled back alleys of Vytal to mask her approach. This is so we avoid the weird jank going on with Cinder's legs up on the rooftops, as well as giving her a more logical approach vector. I know running on the rooftops is cool, but it does zero favors for her to handle things that way. Meanwhile, we cut to Ruby, who has separated herself from the dance to catch her breath, only for Ironwood to approach her directly hoping to have a word. The two converse, and he levels with her that he knows that she knows about Penny's true nature. In maybe one of the first really humanizing moments Ironwood has displayed, he pleads Ruby to stay away from Penny and not drag her into anything crazy like she did back at the docks. Ruby agrees, though she expresses frustration as she can't even get involved in anything crazy at this point since she approached Osmond about her team's investigation. Ironwood is confused and asks Ruby to elaborate, to which Ruby explains the Cliff Note versions of what happened during the Team RWBY investigation and the ensuing Paladin fight. She becomes confused in return because she thought Osmond promised to tell all the headmasters about it. Agreeing that the situation is strange, Ruby explains that she can remotely access her school desktop at the CCT and show him her files on the situation. He agrees, and the two start making their way towards the door. We cut back to Cinder as she knocks out the first CCT guard, pointedly taking a key card from him that lets her enter the building, hiding his body, and following this is where she stealthily knocks out all the other guards in the main section of the CCT and begins ascending the elevator. Back with Ruby and Ironwood, they pass through the doorway, right by Emerald and Mercury, who are dancing quite close to it, and they send a communique that Ironwood and a student have left the dance. Cinder seems mildly perturbed, but she says that she'll be done quite soon. Ironwood is confused seeing no guards outside the CCT, and when he finds the door unlocked, he visibly bristles. After peeking in and seeing all the other guards unconscious, he draws his gun and instructs Ruby to leave while calling in more backup. Ruby refuses and calls in her locker. After momentarily swearing under her breath for not placing a second set of boots in it, she hefts Crescent Rose and swears to act as Ironwood's backup. Up with Cinder, she quickly goes about uploading the Queen program into the system, and just as it finishes, that's when the elevator doors open. Ironwood and Ruby engage Cinder, with Ruby even making a surprise remark that she's not having too hard a time fighting in the heels as she would have thought. Even with that though, RWBY is knocked off her feet and sent scrambling, providing enough of a distraction for Cinder to slip away, having opened one of the windows and slid down a rappelling wire to the ground. Some guards manage to close in on her, but she changes outfits and enters the dance hall when she reconnects with Emerald and Mercury. Ironwood calls in extra security as well as Osmond and Glinda, who have begun to converge on the CCT. Alone, Ironwood investigates the window in the rappel line before commending RWBY for helping him, though he's quick to add that this is exactly the sort of mess he's hoping to keep Penny out of since she isn't ready for it. RWBY is silent on the matter before asking why she might have been here at the tower, to which Ironwood answers that he doesn't know, but he knows it probably isn't good. Thank you for watching Section 3 of Fixing RWBY Part 4. I'd love to give a big shout out to all of my wonderful patrons who have each helped this channel grow into what it is today. If you want to support the channel, please consider donating at patreon.com/CelticPhoenix. Remember, by donating $1 or more, you can get access to the Team Frostbite Discord server, where personalities like myself, FamtanFalling, and Tom Horan of Six Lick Productions regularly interact with our supporters. Please stick around for the next installment, and I'll catch you all on the flip side.